Loyalty is not merely a word, it's a bond, a psychological and spiritual contract that forms the very foundation of trust between two people. When a woman gives her loyalty to a man, especially a good woman, she offers something that is not easily won and should never be taken lightly. That loyalty is forged through sacrifice, consistency, and belief, often belief in the man's potential before even he can see it in himself. It's one of the highest forms of faith a person can show another, and when a man betrays that, he's not just breaking a promise. He's compromising the structural integrity of his own character. Because here's the truth. Loyalty from a good woman requires a man to rise to a certain standard. It calls him to be stable, to be courageous, to act with integrity and competence. In the presence of that loyalty, he is called upward toward maturity, toward responsibility, toward strength. That's what relationships, particularly with women of character, do to men. They pressure us in the best way to be more than we are. So when a man turns his back on that loyalty, when he lies, cheats, manipulates, dismisses, or abuses, what he's actually doing is turning his back on the very thing that was meant to grow him into a man, and it doesn't stop with the external act of betrayal. The internal consequences, the ones you don't see, are often even more devastating. Because every betrayal, no matter how small, creates a fracture in the psyche. When a man knowingly acts against the trust that has been placed in him, there's a part of him that dies. He may justify it in the moment. He may rationalize it as freedom or choice, or even some misguided notion of masculine dominance. But deep down, something starts to decay. The conscience, that quiet internal compass that knows when we've crossed a line, begins to dull. And the more he betrays, the less he feels. The less he feels, the less he knows himself. Now, the culture may try to downplay this. We're told that men need to explore, to avoid commitment, to live their best life. But those messages are hollow. Because behind the mask of bravado, you will often find men who are deeply lost. Men who have betrayed the very things that could have given their life meaning, and who now carry the weight of their own cowardice. They carry it in their posture, in their addictions, in their inability to connect with others in any real or intimate way. The cost is subtle, but it is devastating, and it's not just emotional or psychological. There's a spiritual dimension to it. A man who betrays a good woman often finds himself cut off from something sacred. It's as if in the act of betrayal he severs his connection to the deeper, archetypal part of himself, the part that was meant to lead, to protect, to build. When a man cheats or lies or manipulates someone who truly loved him, he steps out of alignment with the masculine ideal. He becomes fragmented, no longer whole, no longer integrated. And in that fragmentation, he loses access to meaning, to purpose, to peace. Because here's the harsh truth: men need order, they need structure, and a good relationship with a good woman can be one of the most grounding, ordering forces in a man's life. It calls forth his discipline, his attention, his care. It demands the best of him, and in rising to that demand, he becomes stronger. But betrayal is the opposite of order. It is chaos chosen willingly. It is the rejection of stability for impulse. And when a man chooses chaos, when he chooses disloyalty over the slow, patient building of trust, he becomes a slave to his lower nature. And that enslavement doesn't lead to freedom, it leads to decay. Men often believe they can betray and walk away unchanged. But every betrayal leaves a mark. It's cumulative, and over time, those marks become a narrative, a story the man tells himself about who he is. If that story is built on betrayal, it is built on rot. And a rotten foundation cannot support anything of value. Eventually it collapses, sometimes quietly, sometimes catastrophically, but always at a cost. What's more, the betrayal of loyalty breeds shame, and shame, if not confronted, becomes resentment. Not just toward others, but toward oneself. That resentment can show up in 1,000 ways: anger, isolation, cynicism, addiction, self-sabotage. The man begins to project his internal failure onto the world around him. He may blame the woman he hurt. He may blame love itself. He may even blame society, but deep down he knows. He knows what he did. And until he faces it, he will remain imprisoned by it. The tragedy is that many men do not realize the sacredness of loyalty until it's gone. Until the woman who stood by him has walked away. Until the voice that once encouraged him now falls silent. Until he looks in the mirror and sees not the man he could have been, but the man he allowed himself to become through cowardice, ego, and short-sightedness. Loyalty is not a transaction. It is not something you leverage for convenience. It is a mirror. It reflects back who you are. And when you break that mirror, when you betray that reflection, you're not just losing someone else's trust. You're forfeiting your own claim to self-respect. There's a peculiar thing about human relationships. We often don't fully understand the depth of our actions until long after the moment has passed. And when it comes to hurting a good woman, especially one who loved deeply and gave sincerely, the consequences are rarely immediate. They unfold slowly, quietly, like a shadow stretching across the years. Her pain, though perhaps unspoken, does not vanish. It lingers in the background of the man's life, in his choices, his regrets, his failed relationships, his quiet moments of reflection. It echoes not because she holds on to it, but because he can't outrun what it awakened in him. When a good woman is hurt, it's not just an emotional reaction or a passing wound. It's a disruption of something sacred, because a good woman, when she chooses to love, does so with intention. She opens herself, she invests, she builds, she trusts not only the man in front of her, but the future she believes they can create together. So when that is betrayed, whether through dishonesty, indifference, infidelity, or emotional neglect, the pain she experiences isn't superficial. It's existential. It shakes her understanding of safety, of connection, of truth. And yet, strangely enough, the man who causes that pain often feels its full weight only after she's gone. In the moment, he may be numb to it. He may minimize her tears, rationalize his actions, or retreat behind emotional detachment. But pain doesn't disappear because it's ignored. It takes root, and over time it begins to speak, not in loud accusations, but in the quiet language of consequence. That woman's silence begins to echo louder than her words ever did. Her absence becomes a presence in his life, a kind of moral haunting. What makes it worse is that most good women don't respond to betrayal with vengeance. They don't scream or destroy or seek to ruin the man. Instead, they withdraw. They protect their dignity. They preserve what's left of their soul, and in doing so, they create a contrast between who they were and what the man chose to become in response. That contrast becomes unforgettable. It burns itself into memory. The man begins to see her everywhere, not literally, but symbolically. In every woman who doesn't trust him, in every relationship that lacks the warmth she once offered freely, in every moment where he feels disconnected, disrespected, or unloved, because deep down he knows he once had something good and he broke it. This is where the echo begins. The consequences aren't just external, they become internalized. The pain he caused becomes a measure against his future experiences. The way she used to smile when she believed in him, the way she waited for him to grow, the patience she gave, all of it starts to return in fragments. And each memory carries weight, not because she's holding it over him, but because he's beginning to realize that those were the moments that defined the best parts of himself. And now they're gone. It doesn't stop at relationships either. The echo can reach into every area of a man's life. His work begins to feel emptier, his friendships lack depth, his ambition, once fueled by love or the idea of building something meaningful, begins to dry out. Because when a man breaks trust with a good woman, he often breaks trust with his own capacity for connection. He may try to numb it through distraction, shallow pursuits, or the pursuit of control, but underneath it all is the knowledge that he once had the chance to be something more. And he chose less. Some men try to replace what they lost, thinking that if they can find another woman, maybe they can start over. But they soon realize that it's not about the next relationship, it's about who they became in the last one. A new woman doesn't erase the old betrayal. If anything, it highlights it. Because the qualities that once came naturally, trust, openness, patience, are no longer there. The echo of her pain shows up in the man's inability to be present, to be vulnerable, to commit. He's not just haunted by what he did, he's haunted by what he can no longer give. This is why emotional wounds matter. This is why moral injury is real. When a man causes suffering to someone who gave herself in goodness, he doesn't just damage her. He alters the course of his own development. He creates a fork in the road, and the path he takes afterward is darker, more confused, and often lonelier. The echo follows him, not out of punishment, but out of truth, because deep down he knows that her pain was never just about what he did. It was about what he refused to become, and here's the deeper point. A good woman often sees potential in a man long before he sees it in himself. She loves him not for what he has, but for what he could be. She believes in a future that requires patience, effort, and faith. So when that is thrown away, the man doesn't just lose love. He loses the mirror that once reflected his higher self. And without that reflection, he forgets who he is meant to be. That forgetting is the worst part, because a man can lose money, status, opportunities, and recover. But when he loses the part of himself that could love purely, protect deeply, and act with honor, the road back is long. Her pain doesn't end with her tears. It follows him into the decisions he makes, the relationships he ruins, the apologies he can't give, and the peace he no longer feels. When someone places their trust in you, especially in the context of an intimate relationship, they are offering something fragile, something deeply human. It is not a casual gesture. It is a surrender of defenses, a lowering of the walls that life, pain, and experience have carefully constructed. When a good woman chooses to trust a man, it is not because she is naive. It is because she has assessed, consciously or unconsciously, that this man is worthy of entering the most vulnerable parts of her emotional and psychological world. That is not a privilege to be taken lightly, it is a sacred responsibility. Modern culture has cheapened the idea of trust. It's often treated as transactional, something to be earned quickly and discarded even quicker, but genuine trust is not built through performance or charm. It is earned through consistency, integrity, and the willingness to act rightly, even when it's difficult, inconvenient, or unnoticed. When a man receives a woman's trust and treats it as a convenience, something to use for comfort or validation, but not to honor, he commits a subtle but devastating form of betrayal. Not because of one single act, but because of the underlying posture, that he believes her trust exists to serve him, rather than to call him into responsibility. Responsibility is at the heart of trust. The moment someone entrusts their heart, their hopes, their fears to you, they are inviting you into the weight of their life. It's a silent plea for care, not control, not dominance, but stewardship. A man who understands this doesn't see trust as a tool, he sees it as a duty. And he responds to it not with ego, but with reverence. He knows that to be trusted is to be held to a higher standard not by force, but by honor. And when he fails to meet that standard, it is not just the other person who suffers. He suffers too, whether he realizes it or not. Because something changes in a man when he becomes careless with trust. At first, he might not notice it. Maybe he tells a lie to avoid conflict. Maybe he withholds truth to preserve control. Maybe he acts out, justifying it to himself in the moment. But each act chips away at something essential, his alignment with truth, and once a man starts living in contradiction to what he's been trusted with, he begins to fracture internally. His identity splits. He presents one face to the woman who loves him, and another to the reality he's concealing. And that split becomes exhausting. Eventually, it becomes unsustainable. Worse still, the woman who has placed her trust in him begins to sense this fracture, not always in obvious ways. Often it's subtle, a shift in tone, a lack of presence, an erosion of emotional safety. And when that trust begins to dissolve, it doesn't just hurt her, it destabilizes the entire relational structure. Because trust is the foundation upon which emotional intimacy is built. Without it, everything else becomes shaky. Affection feels forced, communication becomes strategic, vulnerability becomes dangerous, the connection, once grounded in openness, becomes guarded, cautious, uncertain. What's tragic is that many men don't fully grasp this until it's too late, until the relationship has crumbled. Until the good woman who once looked at them with warmth and certainty now looks at them with distance, or worse, indifference. And in that moment, they're confronted with the reality that trust is not something you can simply regain with an apology or a grand gesture. Once it's broken, it takes time, humility, and deep internal change to rebuild. And even then, it may never be what it was. Some men, faced with the discomfort of this truth, choose denial. They blame the woman. They tell themselves she was too sensitive, too demanding, too emotional. But that's just a defense mechanism, a way to avoid facing the fact that they mishandled something sacred. Others spiral into self-loathing, haunted by the weight of what they destroyed. But even that is not enough. Because remorse without transformation is useless. The real question is whether the man will allow the pain of broken trust to mature him, to push him toward greater responsibility, toward truthfulness, toward becoming someone worthy of the trust he once squandered. The deeper issue is that many men are never taught what trust actually means. They grow up in environments where dominance is mistaken for strength, where vulnerability is mocked, where emotional responsibility is absent. So when a good woman enters their life and offers her trust, they don't know what to do with it. They may enjoy the feeling of being depended on, but they don't understand the gravity of what they've received. And if they don't learn quickly, they end up breaking what they don't yet value. By the time they understand its worth, it's already gone. Trust is not a passive state. It's an active, ongoing commitment. It means showing up. It means being honest even when it costs you. It means admitting when you're wrong and making it right. It means prioritizing the emotional safety of the other person, not because you're obligated to, but because you recognize the rare and beautiful gift that their openness represents. When a man sees trust this way, he is changed by it. He becomes more deliberate, more grounded, more human. Because he is no longer acting for himself alone, he is holding space for another person's soul. There's a widespread misconception in our culture today about what it means to be strong as a man. Strength is often equated with power, control, and domination, with the ability to impose one's will on others. We see it in movies, in media, and sometimes even in everyday life, the dominant man who commands attention through force or intimidation. But this is a shallow and incomplete understanding of true masculine strength. The kind of strength that matters, the kind that lasts, is not about ruling over others or asserting superiority. It's about protection. It's about creating a space where vulnerability can exist without fear. It's about standing as a fortress, not a tyrant. Protection is a fundamentally different concept from domination. Domination says, I am above you, you must obey me. Protection says, I am here to shield you from harm, you are safe because of me. A man who dominates uses strength to control. A man who protects uses strength to serve. And the latter is what true masculinity demands. Because without protection, there can be no safety, no trust, no peace. And without those, any relationship, personal, familial, or social, begins to crumble. A good woman, or any person for that matter, does not want to be dominated, she wants to be protected. She wants to know that the man in her life will stand firm when storms come, that he will not waver when danger or difficulty arises. Protection is not about physical strength alone. It's about emotional courage, moral clarity, and consistent presence. It means showing up when it's hard, speaking up when injustice occurs, and holding the line when temptation calls. It means being the calm in the chaos, the rock in the shifting tides. Too often, men mistake aggression for strength. They think that asserting dominance, being louder, more forceful, more ruthless is what makes them powerful. But aggression is reactive, protection is proactive. Aggression fractures and alienates, protection builds and connects. When a man protects, he is not merely defending another person from external threats, he is creating a foundation where trust can flourish. He is making it possible for love, vulnerability, and growth to happen. That is the essence of true strength. Masculine protection requires a certain kind of self-discipline. It demands that a man master his impulses, fears, and desires so that he can act not from selfishness or ego, but from responsibility. Protection is sacrificial. It means putting someone else's well-being before your own comfort. It means sometimes standing in harm's way, taking the blows, bearing the burden, so that others don't have to. This is why it is often said that true strength is measured not by what a man can take, but by what he can endure for the sake of those he loves. This kind of strength is rare because it is difficult. It requires a maturity that is not always celebrated in our culture, a maturity that embraces restraint as much as action, humility as much as confidence, and empathy as much as resolve. A man who truly protects understands that power without compassion is tyranny, and that control without love is cruelty. He doesn't need to prove himself through dominance because his strength is demonstrated in his ability to hold space for others, to be strong enough to be gentle, firm enough to be patient. Protection also involves the courage to confront oneself. A man must first protect his own integrity before he can protect others. That means facing his own weaknesses, acknowledging his flaws, and striving to grow. It means refusing to hide behind excuses or blame. A protector does not run from responsibility. He embraces it fully, and in doing so, he becomes a source of stability not only for those he protects but for himself. Because inner strength and outer protection are inseparable, the failure to protect, on the other hand, is the root of much suffering. When a man abdicates this role, whether through selfishness, neglect, or cowardice, he leaves a void that no one else can fill. The people around him feel unsafe, the relationship loses its foundation, trust is broken, and over time the absence of protection manifests in fear, anxiety, resentment, and distance. The man who fails to protect is not only harming those he should care for, he is also destroying a vital part of his own soul. This is especially true in the context of hurting a good woman. When a man hurts someone who trusted him, he is not only inflicting emotional pain, he is failing to protect the very person who believed in him. He is betraying the role he was meant to play, the role of guardian and defender. That failure reverberates far beyond the immediate hurt. It undermines the foundation of what could have been a partnership built on mutual respect and safety. It signals a collapse of the protective strength that should have held the relationship together through hardship. Moreover, protection is not about control or domination within the relationship, but about mutual care and respect. It is a dynamic where strength is used to create freedom, not bondage. When a man protects, he empowers the other person to be fully themselves. He removes the threat of harm, judgment, or abandonment so that vulnerability can thrive. This is the paradox of masculine strength. It is strongest not when it asserts itself over others, but when it serves others selflessly. In a world that often confuses power with oppression, the message that masculine strength is about protection is radical. It calls men to reject the shallow allure of domination and instead embrace a higher calling. It asks men to step into their role as caretakers of not just bodies, but hearts and minds. It challenges men to redefine what it means to be strong not as conquerors, but as guardians. And it reminds us all that the measure of a man's strength is found not in how much he can control, but in how well he can protect those he loves. This vision of strength is difficult but necessary, because only through protection can trust be maintained. Only through protection can love be nurtured. Only through protection can the chaos of the world be held at bay, even if just for a moment. And when a man embraces this responsibility, he aligns himself with something far greater than himself, a legacy of strength that builds rather than destroys, that shields rather than dominates, that creates space for life to flourish rather than fear to reign. This is a profound truth that echoes through history and psychology alike. The feminine principle embodied in women, but also represented symbolically in culture, relationships, and society, is foundational to the development and flourishing of civilization. When a man wounds a good woman, he does not merely injure an individual, he damages a vital part of the social fabric. He disrupts the delicate balance that sustains families, communities, and ultimately, the order that allows culture to thrive. The feminine principle is often misunderstood or undervalued in modern discourse. It is not simply about gender roles or biology. Rather, it represents qualities such as nurturing receptivity, emotional intelligence, creativity, and the capacity to hold space for life and growth. These qualities are essential, not just for personal relationships, but for the health of society at large. When these qualities are honored and protected, they create a fertile ground for trust, cooperation, and innovation. When they are wounded, the consequences ripple outward in ways that destabilize the very structures upon which civilization depends. A good woman, in particular, often serves as a guardian of these feminine values. She embodies care, loyalty, and emotional resilience. Her strength is quiet but profound. When she is hurt, whether through betrayal, neglect, or abuse, the wound extends beyond her personal suffering. It sends a message to those around her that these feminine qualities can be disregarded, that the foundation she supports is vulnerable. This weakens the ties that bind people together, and the repercussions are felt in families that fracture, communities that lose cohesion, and societies that grow cynical and divided. History is filled with examples of what happens when the feminine is wounded on a large scale. When women are oppressed, disrespected, or devalued, the culture around them often descends into disorder. Violence increases, social trust erodes, and the capacity for empathy diminishes. The very essence of civilization, which is built on mutual respect, shared values, and cooperation, begins to crumble. This is not a mere coincidence. It is a direct consequence of neglecting the balance between masculine and feminine energies. From a psychological perspective, wounding the feminine creates deep distortions in the psyche of individuals and groups. Men who hurt good women often do so from a place of confusion or unresolved inner conflict. This act of wounding is a reflection of their own brokenness, but it also perpetuates damage beyond themselves. The feminine qualities within men, the capacity for empathy, compassion, and emotional connection, are suppressed or distorted. This creates a cycle of dysfunction that feeds itself. The more the feminine is wounded, the more the masculine becomes aggressive, disconnected, or toxic. And the more this cycle continues, the more fragile civilization becomes. On a practical level, when good women are hurt, the consequences are immediate and visible in relationships and families. Trust breaks down, emotional safety is lost, and the environment needed for raising healthy children is compromised. Children learn from their environment, and when the feminine energy is wounded, the lessons they receive about love, respect, and cooperation are warped. This has long-term effects. As the next generation grows up with a skewed understanding of what healthy relationships look like, the legacy of pain and mistrust carries forward, weakening the social fabric further. Wounding the feminine also weakens the broader cultural and moral foundation. Societies rely on a balance of masculine and feminine energies to function properly. The masculine brings order, structure, and action. The feminine brings creativity, nurture, and relational depth. When the feminine is wounded, this balance tips dangerously. The culture may become overly rigid, overly aggressive, or excessively competitive. This imbalance leads to increased conflict, alienation, and a loss of meaning. Civilization suffers not only because of external chaos, but because the internal harmony that sustains it is disrupted. It is important to recognize that honoring the feminine does not mean diminishing the masculine. True civilization requires both. The problem arises only when one is wounded or suppressed. When a man hurts a good woman, he is not simply harming her. He is wounding the very principle that calls him toward growth, empathy, and connection. He is undermining the conditions necessary for himself and others to live meaningful, balanced lives. This is why the act of hurting a good woman carries consequences far beyond the immediate pain. It weakens the potential for flourishing in ways that ripple across time and space. The feminine principle also represents a connection to something transcendent, something beyond the self and immediate survival. It holds the power to create community, to sustain hope, and to inspire transformation. When this is wounded, civilization loses its heart. The stories that bind people together lose their power. The rituals and values that provide meaning become hollow. The collective spirit grows weary and fragmented. In this way, hurting a good woman is not just a personal failing. It is a failure of vision for what civilization could be. Men who understand this recognize that their actions have significance beyond themselves. They see that the feminine they encounter in their lives is not an obstacle to their strength, but an essential partner in building something enduring and true. They understand that protecting and honoring the feminine is a vital part of their own maturity and contribution to society. And they realize that when they fail in this, the consequences are not limited to their private lives, they touch the broader world. This awareness brings with it a call to responsibility. To live with integrity means to honor the feminine wherever it is found. It means to treat good women with respect, care, and protection, not because it is demanded or expected, but because it is right. It means to recognize the profound role the feminine plays in sustaining civilization and to act accordingly. When a man embraces this, he becomes part of a larger movement, a movement toward healing, restoration, and balance that benefits everyone. Ignoring this truth only deepens the wound. It perpetuates cycles of pain, distrust, and fragmentation that weaken not just individuals but entire societies. The consequences are visible in the erosion of family structures, the rise of social alienation, and the increase in violence and despair. The cost of wounding the feminine is high, and it is paid not only by women, but by all who depend on the stability and nurturance the feminine provides. The recognition that wounding the feminine weakens civilization is both a warning and an invitation. It warns of the dangers of neglect, abuse, and disrespect, but it also invites men to rise, to choose protection over harm, respect over contempt, and care over neglect. It calls men to see that their greatest strength lies not in dominance, but in their capacity to uphold and nurture the feminine principle that is so essential to the health of relationships, communities, and the world at large. When a man hurts a good woman, the damage is real and profound, but it is not the end of the story. There is a path forward, a path that requires courage, humility, and a willingness to confront oneself honestly. Healing is possible, but it cannot begin without accountability. Accountability is more than just admitting fault or saying I'm sorry. It is a deep recognition of the harm caused, an ownership of one's actions and their consequences, and a commitment to change. Without accountability, any attempt at healing is superficial, temporary, or even deceptive. True accountability demands that a man stop deflecting blame or minimizing his role in the pain inflicted. It requires him to look squarely at the ways he failed, to see the specific actions, attitudes, or patterns that contributed to the wound. This is often uncomfortable, even painful, It means dismantling the ego defenses that protect self-image at the expense of truth. But it is necessary because without this honest appraisal, there can be no genuine remorse or understanding. And without remorse, healing remains out of reach. Accountability also involves empathy. It means stepping into the shoes of the woman who was hurt, not to feel guilty in a vague or self-punishing way, but to truly grasp the depth of her suffering. It means recognizing that the damage caused is not just emotional, but relational and existential. It affects her sense of safety, trust, and worth. This empathetic connection is essential because it transforms accountability from a mere intellectual exercise into a moral and emotional reality. It motivates change not out of fear or obligation, but out of respect and care. Once accountability is embraced, transformation becomes possible. Transformation is the process through which a man moves from denial and defensiveness to growth and maturity. It requires a sustained effort, not a one-time gesture, but a lifelong commitment. Transformation involves learning new ways of relating, communicating, and being present. It means developing emotional intelligence, practicing humility, and cultivating patience. It often requires seeking help through counseling, mentorship, or spiritual guidance to break destructive patterns and build healthier ones. This process is neither quick nor easy. It challenges deeply ingrained habits and worldviews. It forces a man to confront uncomfortable truths about himself. But it also opens the door to profound growth. When a man undergoes true transformation, he becomes capable of deeper love, greater respect, and more authentic connection. He no longer repeats the mistakes that caused pain, but instead builds relationships founded on trust and care. In this way, transformation is both a personal redemption and a restoration of relational integrity. Healing also requires time. The wounds caused by betrayal or neglect do not disappear overnight. Trust once broken takes patience and consistent effort to rebuild. The woman who was hurt needs space to process her pain, to regain her sense of safety, and to decide whether to engage in reconciliation. Healing cannot be rushed or forced. It must unfold naturally, with respect for boundaries and the rhythms of emotional recovery. In this journey, actions speak louder than words. Apologies are important but insufficient without changed behavior. A man committed to healing must demonstrate through his actions that he is trustworthy, reliable, and respectful. He must be willing to listen without defensiveness, to be vulnerable without withdrawing, and to show up consistently even when it's difficult. This consistency builds new patterns of trust and safety, slowly repairing what was broken. The willingness to be vulnerable is itself a sign of strength and transformation. A man who can admit his faults, ask for help, and expose his fears is no longer trapped by the false ideal of invulnerability. He recognizes that real strength lies in honesty and openness. This vulnerability invites genuine intimacy and connection, creating a foundation for healing that is deeper and more resilient. It is also important to recognize that healing is not always linear. There may be setbacks, misunderstandings, and moments of doubt. This is normal. The process of transformation is complex and involves many layers of emotional and psychological work. Both the man and the woman involved may experience frustration and pain along the way, but perseverance is key. The commitment to accountability and change must remain steadfast, even in the face of difficulties. Beyond individual relationships, this process has broader implications. When men take responsibility for their actions and pursue transformation, they contribute to a culture of integrity and respect. They break cycles of harm and model new possibilities for masculinity, possibilities rooted in honor, empathy, and care. This ripple effect strengthens families, communities, and society as a whole. Healing through accountability also challenges toxic narratives about masculinity that discourage emotional honesty and responsibility. It asserts that true manhood involves facing one's mistakes, owning one's impact, and committing to growth. This redefinition of strength expands the possibilities for men to be fully human, flawed, vulnerable, accountable, and capable of love. Ultimately, healing begins not when a man simply wishes to make amends, but when he commits to a radical transformation of character. It is a call to rise above past failures, to learn from them, and to embody a higher standard of integrity. This transformation honors the good woman who was hurt and affirms the potential for relationships to be places of healing, growth, and mutual respect. This path is not easy, but it is necessary. It requires courage to confront the truth, humility to admit failure, and perseverance to change. It demands that a man engage in ongoing self-reflection and be willing to face uncomfortable realities about himself. But in doing so, he unlocks the possibility of redemption, not just in the eyes of others, but in his own heart. Healing through accountability and transformation is the foundation for rebuilding what was broken and creating relationships that are stronger, wiser, and more compassionate than before.